YouTube! Hello and Happy New Year, belatedly. I hope you all had a superb Christmas and as good a New Year period as I did. I spent most of it with friends. New Year's I spent down in London with my friends Gerard, also known as Wolfgang1, Linky here or down there. And Janice, which was absolutely superb, just incredible fun. Since then, I have been I haven't actually stopped. I've been working, I've been writing, and I have a new job, which is why I haven't been around as much. This video, unfortunately, it's a sort of, I suppose it's a bit of a downer. It's a negative start to the new year on YouTube. But I really want to follow up on my last video, the Rationalising Prejudice video. I'm not going to be addressing the individual that was aimed at anymore. This video is not aimed at him because he's made it very clear that dialogue is... well, he can't engage in dialogue, it's impossible. So what I really want to do is talk in a more general sense about what prejudice is and how it functions, the dynamic of prejudice, what it performs and where it derives from. Now, the very notion of prejudice, what is it? Basically, it is prejudgment. It is automatic prejudgment of an individual or of a group of human beings based upon incidental or arbitrary factors. For example, one's skin colour, one's sexuality, one's tribal history, and so on and so forth. Now, one thing that always strikes me when I deal with someone who operates under a particular prejudice, regardless of what it is, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's based on ideology or whether it's based on an inalienable biological factor such as skin colour or whatever, it really doesn't matter. If you prejudge on the basis of a characteristic or a label that someone applies to themselves, then you operate under a prejudice. And it is, by very definition, ill-considered and illegitimate. Now, one of the things I always find rather interesting when I deal with someone who operates under a prejudice is that it seems fairly evident to me that the prejudice is a priori, that meaning that it exists before the rationalizations and the justifications that come later, which are applied retrospectively. This was particularly clear when I was dealing with the gentleman in my last video. It's very clear that his prejudice exists before any of the rationalizations or justifications that he spewed as defense for it came about. But, like everyone who operates under a prejudice, he lacked the capacity to identify that fact, that the justifications, which were themselves obviously illegitimate, as they always are, consisting of misquotes, quote mining, cherry-picked arguments, things quoted from illegitimate sources, and so on and so forth. He lacked the capacity to identify that the prejudice was something that existed prior to his acquisition of those justifications. And therefore the justifications themselves are illegitimate. They may, in fact, there may actually be justifications that require consideration amongst them, but they are incidental, considering that they were accrued and applied later. The prejudice already existed. Why? Well, that depends on the prejudice in question, but you can synthesize every single prejudice, every single prejudicial position down to a very basic root cause. And I know that long-time viewers of my channel will be sick of hearing this word, but it's tribalism. Tribalism, again, the root of all evil. Richard Dawkins, in his documentary, claimed that religion is the root of all evil. He's wrong. He's absolutely wrong. Religion is not the root of all evil. Religion is a byproduct of a particular factor or characteristic of our species, and that is the tribalism to which I'm referring to. Religion and extreme ideologies, be they political, philosophical, or whatever, ideology in general, any ideology that provides a sense of self-definition that allows one to say, I am blah, therefore I think or believe blah 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 blah, is a byproduct and an expression of this problem, of this characteristic, the tribal imperative, that is the root cause of almost every evil our species commits. Certainly on the wider scale, every large historical evil, every war, every genocide is a byproduct of this imperative. It's the thing that allows us to dehumanize other human beings. It's the thing that allows us to say they exist outside of the tribe, they exist outside of the truth, they exist outside of blah 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 blah. They are sinful, they are dirty, they are wicked, they are subhuman. Therefore, they are not worthy of the same consideration, of the same rights, of the same status as us human beings who adhere to the truth, who are biologically pure, who are blah 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 blah, whatever. Whatever language it occurs in, it really doesn't matter. It is still the same imperative. And that is the grand evil. It's the factor of our species that we need to evolve beyond. Either intellectually or biologically. I mean, it is biologically based. I mean, our neocortexes, which allow us to consider in the abstract, and which are the seat of imagination and consideration and empathy, are too small or too inactive, too malnourished, whereas our adrenal glands, which pump us full of tribalistic adrenaline and which are the basis of our fear, flight, or fight responses, are too active and too large, and that is a problem. Christopher Hitchens states, or postulates rather, that he believes that all human beings are likely inherently racist. I don't know whether that's true, but I think I think there probably is some truth in it. I think it's further than that, though. I think, as I say, we are inherently tribalistic, and this is not a postulation. This is evident. This is evident simply by not only by the way our societies and our cultures organise themselves into particular subcultural groups and so on and so forth, who are self-reflexive and self-identifying, but the means by which individual determines sense of self, which is largely by reflection of whatever group we happen to identify with, be it an abstract ideological group such as the atheists or on YouTube, or be it something that is more culturally entrenched, like the particular forms of Christians who will go to church and meet with one another and have the ideologies, the tribalistic ideologies, reinforced and reinforced and reinforced in a fetishistic manner by a particular figurehead. It really doesn't matter. It's all the same imperative. We all do it. Everybody does it because it is part of our species. It is to a certain degree a double-edged sword, because it's what holds our societies together. It's what maintains culture, but it's also what smothers and constricts culture as well, and disallows it from progressing or evolving beyond very particular parameters. One has to be very, very careful when one proclaims or postulates that we are inherently tribal or inherently racist or whatever. This is not an argument for tribalism, nor is it an argument for racism. It is not a justification. Simply because we have profound evidence that these factors of our existence can be overcome through consideration. Yes, getting back specifically to the subject of prejudice. As anyone who has dealt with someone who operates from a prejudicial position will know, and there are plenty of them to take your pick from on YouTube. I mean, there are homophobes, there are racists, there are anti-Semites, there are just it's a grab bag. It is a pick and mix of prejudice here on YouTube. As you will know, it's almost impossible. It is almost impossible to demonstrate to the person operating from a prejudicial position that their position is illegitimate, regardless of what rationalizations and justifications they happen to vomit up, simply because of the fact of their retrospective application, which they always are. I mean, the justifications for prejudice are almost always flimsy. There is, by its very nature, there is always a counter-argument, there is always something which is misrepresented. What the because the prejudice, the tribal identification that comes from identifying a particular enemy outside of the tribe, because it's so bound up parasitically with the individual's sense of self-perception, they will take anything that they think informs or reinforces that prejudice, and absorb it. They absorb it almost cannibalistically. It actually becomes part of them, and it becomes part of the structure of the parasite itself, and therefore part of the structure of self, part of the structure of self-definition. Therefore, any attack or criticism of the prejudice becomes a personal attack, which is evident it's certainly evident from the gentleman I was dealing with in the last video, simply because of the way he reacted. I mean, he consistently, from the very beginning, it didn't even start considered. From the very beginning, he would use words like faggot, like dyke, he would use the prejudicial language and do so in a very aggressive manner, but couldn't see that even given his assumptions and assertions, for example, I think his principal assertion was that either way, homosexuality is some sort of disorder. That's what he wanted to present, either be it through some sort of biological malfunction or through environmental factors such as abuse or whatever. This is what he was trying to assert. But he couldn't see that even I could allow him those assumptions within the context of the argument, but he couldn't see that even if I allowed for those assumptions, and they are just assumptions and assertions, obviously, without any basis in reality, it still doesn't explain his hostility. I mean, let's allow for the assumption that homosexuality, which was his particular tribal enemy, that was the tribal enemy that he'd identified, was a disorder, that it is a malfunction of some sort. My immediate response would be, so what? How does that legitimize your hostility, your aggressive response? If homosexuality were a malfunction of some sort, then it would be pertinent, it would be appropriate to treat it in the same way as a mental disorder, presumably. And you don't treat people with mental disorders with aggression and hostility, do you? And of course, again, the justifications come out. Then, it's not homosexuality specifically. It's the homosexual movement, whatever that is, that I dislike for whatever reason. This, despite the fact that he was using prejudicial language consistently and aggression towards anyone who not only identified as homosexual, such as myself, but towards anyone who defended, or who simply not so much defended homosexuality. It's not something that really requires defense, but presented a counter-argument or a criticism of his positions. He couldn't get it. He refused to see, despite attempts to point it out to him in explicit language and detail. He couldn't get it. And this is something that is consistent amongst people who hold prejudicial perspectives, regardless of what their tribal enemy is. And it's not an inability. I don't think it is necessarily an inability to see this. It is rather an unwillingness. It's a defense mechanism, because if they were forced to regard the prejudice they hold objectively, then they would be forced to regard themselves, their sense of self-definition, their tribal identification objectively, and that is painful. That would be painful. It's the unwillingness to do so that's part of the issue. Some people actually do it. I mean, there are individuals who were raised in sort of neo-Nazi or right-wing or fascist or whatever. They were raised or inculcated with particular prejudices against whatever group, be it ethnic or whatever, but who managed to come through it, who managed to deconstruct it, as a result of their own considerations and experiences. I imagine it's incredibly painful. Incredibly painful. But there we go. I think that's all I really have to say on the issue for now. I'm very interested in other people's thoughts, apart from you, Charlie Checkham, or whatever the fuck your name is. I'm not interested in hearing from you because you're a git. I hope everyone is having a good new year. Speak to you soon. Whee!